Welcome to our coverage of the Noor Salman trial here on clickorlando.com. Thank you for joining us. I'm Julie Broughton. A bombshell in the courtroom today as the prosecution rests its case. Salman could bond out of jail after a possible mistake by the U.S. government. Let's get right out to News 6 investigator Mike DeForest. He's been at the courthouse all day. And Mike, could Salman walk out of jail before her trial ends?
Her attorneys are going to be asking the judge for that. We'll explain in a little bit why that may occur. We don't know if she actually will be granted bond, but it sounds like her attorneys right now are trying to write up some paperwork to see if they can make that happen. Today was a very big day for the prosecution as they rested their case. One of their last witnesses was an FBI agent. His specialty was studying cell phone tower pings. You know, when you use your phone, you ping off of a tower. Well, he's able to plot on a map roughly the area where you're at. And so using these maps that he created with cell phone tower pings, he put together a multimedia presentation basically showing the timeline from about a couple weeks before the Pulse nightclub attack and where Noor Salman and her husband Omar Mateen were at pretty much any moment during those weeks leading up to the attack. At the same time, they were able to show the text messages they were exchanging, the websites that they were looking at, and surveillance videos of places that they visited in those weeks leading up to the attack. For example, one surveillance video that the jury saw was Noor Salman driving a car with her husband, and they pull into Walmart. And inside that Walmart, Omar Mateen goes to the sporting goods section and buys some ammo for a gun. Noor Salman and their child later join him there, and they pay for it together at the sporting goods counter. Others show them at the Bass Pro Shop here in Orlando as Omar Mateen was buying magazines for the rifle. You see him buying this rifle at a sporting goods store down in Port St. Lucie, and then he takes this rifle, the Sig Sauer that he used to murder people at Pulse nightclub, and he's in a shooting range doing target practice just a couple days before the Pulse attack. This is just some of the things the jury saw in their timeline as they tried to explain why Noor Salman aided her husband in carrying out this attack. We are joined right now by attorney Whitney Bone. The prosecution, I would imagine, really had to make a big splash here as closing their case. And I can say from watching this, it was compelling to see this all laid out on a timeline.
Sure. I mean, certainly their forensic digital capabilities and computer capabilities are very impressive. What remains to be seen, and what I think was lacking today, was a good summary in terms of how does this prove all of this wonderful digital and forensic and video and internet and cell phone ping information prove that Noor Salman knew that her husband was planning an attack and aided him in doing so. I think, like you said, there was the purchase at Walmart of the firearm, and she was there. She drove him there, and she's there with her son, and he gets the Paw Patrol toy and puts it on the sporting good counter. And I think that was a very big moment in terms of, wow, the impact of this. However, what's interesting and was brought out by the defense is that gun and that ammunition that was at issue at that time of the Walmart purchase was ammunition he purchased for his work weapon. So it has no link to this incident at Pulse at all. So while it's wonderful that she was there, it doesn't tend to prove that she knew, because of what happened at that point in time, at least with this ammunition purchase, that he was planning an attack on the Pulse nightclub.
And what this FBI agent was asked to do in between showing this timeline of where Noor Salman was is he would read sections of this statement that she reportedly gave to the FBI where she would say, "I went with my husband to Walmart." And then they would show video of her at Walmart. And this is just trying to bolster the fact that what she said in this statement was true. And if you started to believe all the components of this statement, then you must presumably believe the parts where she said, "I knew he was going to attack Pulse."
Well, absolutely. But what happened with that whole theory of prosecution is they went right down the primrose path into the hands of the defense in terms of walking right into what we've been talking about that was in the defense motion about opening statements prior to this trial, which is that Noor Salman supposedly told these FBI agents that she went with Omar Mateen to case the Pulse nightclub prior to the night of this attack, and it never happened.
And that was a big thing they hammered home.
Huge.
Just to reiterate, it was on June 8th, a couple days before the Pulse nightclub attack. Pardon us as there's a fire truck going back behind us here. June 8th, Noor Salman tells the FBI that on that day, she and her husband were at a falafel restaurant in Kissimmee, and that they went from the restaurant and right afterwards went and drove around Pulse nightclub for about 20 minutes with the windows of the car down. Now, what this cell phone tower ping expert was able to show was accurately, as Noor Salman reportedly said, they were at the King of Falafel restaurant in Kissimmee, and he was able to show the time that they were there based on their cell phone pings and their receipt from the restaurant. What then happens is 45 minutes later, their cell phones once again ping in that same area in Kissimmee, which means they only had a 45-minute window to drive from Kissimmee up to Pulse, presumably drive around for 20 minutes and then come back. But even if they just went there and back, this FBI agent had to admit that would have almost been impossible. There just wasn't enough time for her to get from Kissimmee to Pulse and back and still hit the cell phone towers.
Absolutely. And you know why this is such a big deal here is that if it's wonderful that the government has evidence that, you know, she said they went to certain places and they went to Walmart and he bought a gun, and then sure enough they went to Walmart and he bought a gun, and it matches up with her statement. But so much of what they're relying on here are statements that they cannot corroborate, in terms of her supposedly telling FBI agents in an unrecorded interview without a lawyer over 10 hours of interrogation that she knew what he was going to do. And so when you call into question the fact that if she made this statement that she went with him to case this place, and that just isn't true, it's not there, then it certainly calls into question these statements that they can't corroborate in terms of what her state of mind was and what she knew. They are also called into question, and that's huge in this case, because this is the government's burden of proof. Noor Salman does not have to prove that she didn't know anything or that she's innocent. That's not how our Constitution works. This is their burden, and I think what they did today is show that, you know, they're basically leading right into the defense's case. It's like the perfect segue into, wow, let's talk about this more now in terms of how this doesn't add up.
And what the defense's case will presumably be when they start on Monday morning is they are going to argue that the FBI coerced Noor Salman into making a false confession. And you know, case example number one is going to be her saying, we drove around Pulse, but hey, don't you remember that FBI agent who said that is impossible?
Right, exactly. And I believe they're going to have an expert about false confessions, which is a reality. I mean, we have some of the biggest rates of wrongful convictions in the state of Florida that have been proven through DNA evidence, and in an overwhelming amount of those cases, something like 35 to 40%. There's been studies done that the defendants in those cases confess to the crimes, you know, and then later DNA exonerates them. False confessions are real. They're going to bring an expert, is my understanding, who's going to explain this to the jury in terms of, it's not just that we're saying that it's false. These are the factors that would play into somebody being more likely to give a false confession. And I think a lot of those factors are going to be here. And we don't have a recording of it, so we don't know how this all went down. And we will never know.
Well, another really big issue that cropped up today involved that statement we were just talking about. Noor Salman's statement to the FBI reportedly that they drove around Pulse, and this FBI agent saying, based on cell phone towers, it's practically impossible that happened. Well, back when Noor Salman was arrested in January of 2016, so a little bit more than a year from now, she wanted to get out on bond. Most criminal defendants are allowed to get out of jail if they post a bond and can be out with their families, working with their attorneys. But the prosecution asked that she be held without bond and remain in jail. And one of the reasons that they told Judge Byron here why she should remain in jail is because she reportedly confessed to the FBI that she and her husband cased Pulse. And the judge, in his order denying her bond, acknowledged that that was one of the factors that factored into his decision to keep her locked up in jail for the last year and 3 months. Well, today, as this FBI agent is on the witness stand, and I understand the jury was still in the room there for a moment, he asked the FBI agent, when did you find out that it would have been almost impossible for her to go down to Pulse? And he said, well, I turned it over to basically the supervisors, the case agent on this, shortly after he discovered it, which he didn't give a date, but we know that that had to be long before Noor Salman was even arrested.
Absolutely.
The defense really seizes on this. You kind of explain where they go from here with this.
Well, I think they're going to go a number of ways with it. You know, first off, they're going to go the route of trying to ask for her release at this point in time, because the information the judge relied upon, or partially relied upon at least, in order to deny her release pending trial, has been proven to be false. And so I think, in light of all of this, they're going to ask the judge at this point to let her out. In addition, however, they're going to argue that there's been what's called a Brady violation. And Brady means Brady versus Maryland. That's just the name of a U.S. Supreme Court case that's kind of the governing law from the U.S. Supreme Court on the issue in terms of when the government has, or a prosecutor has information that somebody's innocent. We call it exculpatory evidence. But what that means is that some information that tends to show somebody didn't commit the crime or that they're innocent, that they're supposed to disclose that information to the defendant, to the defendant's attorneys, and that way we have fair trials. We have rules here, and if we don't have the rules, then we don't have anything. And so what happened today, as a practicing criminal defense attorney, is very disappointing. This is the kind of stuff that makes me lose sleep, because we want to believe that if we're going to have a trial where this woman's going to be tried for things that are not based on really hard evidence, I don't know if she's guilty or not. I don't know what the jury is going to decide, but I do know that we have a system based on our Constitution. And we have rules, and those rules weren't followed. And if you play within the rules and you get a conviction, great. But what's happened here it's very upsetting to me. It's very disappointing, and I'm disappointed on behalf of Noor Salman, her lawyers, and the victims of this crime who are watching this happen.
And Noor Salman's attorneys have indicated that probably right now as we speak, they are trying to draw up the paperwork to ask for Noor Salman to be released through the pendency of this case. Now, it's very possible that the judge may, once he reviews this, say, hey, this would not have changed my decision,
sure,
and that she should have stayed in jail. But on the other hand, what do you think the likelihood is that she's going to be set free, at least until a jury reaches a verdict or some other resolution of this case?
I don't know, because certainly the judge did rely on other reasons in terms of what was presented to him back in March of 2017 when her lawyers were fighting for her release here in the Middle District of Florida. And this, again, that's what's really kind of very troubling about this. This is a bell that can't be unrung. She's been in jail now for over a year. And I don't know, and neither do you, neither does anybody else, how much that played into Judge Byron's decision at that time. So I guess we'll find out in terms of if he feels like that changes the matrix of how he got to the place where he decided she needed to be detained. But I find it to be very sad, because now the trial is near over, and she has been held, at least in part, on false information.
As we always say, stay tuned. We'll see what's happened.
Yes.
Attorney Whitney Bone, thank you so much for your thoughts on this. It was an interesting day legally, big legal developments in the courtroom. What's next in terms of this? Well, tomorrow morning, the jury will not be here, but the attorneys will be to discuss the jury instructions. And based on what happened today, we really don't know what else could happen tomorrow. So stay tuned here on News 6 and clickorlando.com. We're going to send it back to you, Julie.
All right, Mike, thank you. Certainly a lot of developments today. Get complete coverage, including our team's minute-by-minute tweets from inside the courthouse. Go to clickorlando.com/Noor Salman trial. Join us tomorrow morning for another discussion. Our coverage begins at 8:30 right here on clickorlando.com. Thank you for joining us. I'm Julie Broughton.